Chapter 5 The First Trumpets, Cosmic Storm, the 8th and ninth chapters. The cycle of the seven seals seems not to have reached its full development even at the end. The sphere of the trumpet blast presses upon as if unable to await its due time. The seven trumpets appear within the seventh seal, thereby becoming visible at the stage of imagination before they begin to sound at the stage of inspiration. As in the transition from the seven messages to the seven seals, so now between seals and trumpets a solemn pause intervenes. But its content is not quite so majestic as the divine figures who stood in the environment of the heavenly throne before the Lamb unloosed the seals of the book. It seems as if the breathing space of the gods is cut short. Indeed, instead of forming a genuine interval between the seventh seal and the first trumpet, the pause is antedated, as it were, within the seventh seal. When he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. Now the trumpet motif appears, though at first only as a quiet picture within the heavenly silence. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. We sense what is to come, and because of this premonition, the silence is tense. We cannot see the trumpets without the foreboding that presently they will sound, and their blast will shatter the world. Nevertheless, the order of events demands an interval. Archetypes of devotion and worship are revealed. The center is formed by the altar, which has made a prophetic appearance once before. We witness a solemn rite celebrated in heaven. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which rose, and the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. The pause before the opening of the seals was filled with the song of praise with which those on high accompanied the beginning of creation. Now in the second pause, a scene nearer to the human level is enacted. The figure of a heavenly priest advances to the altar to celebrate a ritual act. The Revelation of St. John presents a sequence of significant focal pictures. Before the cycle of the seven seals, the book made its appearance in heaven. Since the seals are attached to the book, the picture of the book becomes the source of the unfolding of all the following cycles of seven. At the beginning of the seven trumpet blasts, the altar appears in heaven. In the fifth seal, it has appeared once already, as if in an act of approaching, when the theme is developed as the seals unfold. And at the end of the opening of the seals, the altar has become the sacred center of all things. From it the forces issue which carry the development forward to the next stages. Just as the seals were loosed on the book, so the seven trumpets sound from the heavenly altar. At last, the great cycle of the seven golden vials are handed down from the temple in heaven. But this is the third structural picture of the apocalypse. These fundamental pictures, the book, the altar, and the temple, stand at the beginning of each cycle in turn. The polarity of the book and the altar points to the basic order of all spiritual life. Even in heaven, the duality of doctrine and ritual exists. The supersensible world contains the thronging thoughts of God, which as they begin to move and become a world, appear in the pictures of a sealed book. On the other hand, the heavens declare also the unfolding deeds of God, the proceedings of the celestial hierarchies, the actions of the beings in the higher spheres. So these are no profane transactions. Every deed is an act of consecration. The proceedings and transactions of the gods are nothing else but the celebration of a rite, and the center of all heavenly proceedings and transactions can only be an altar. The doctrine of the heavens, the thoughts of God, ritual of the heaven, the deeds and actions of the heavenly hierarchies. If there is to be harmony between heaven and earth, the fundamental ordering of heaven must be reflected on earth. This is, in truth, the function of religion. The book must not only be in heaven, on earth also the book must hold a central place. Likewise, there must be, as a clear reflection and likeness on earth, in the midst of all the busy doings and activities of men, the act of consecration, the rite celebrated at the altar, There must be no shortage of altars on earth. One of the reasons why the apocalypse was not adequately valued in the Protestant era may have been that the apocalyptic descriptions of the celebration of the angels at the heavenly altar was felt, if not Roman, at least as something alien. Indeed, no purely human thought can ever produce a real altar. It is futile to invent a ritual, or to put together from traditional sources to make an aesthetic unit. Ritual, like doctrine, must be derived from the spiritual worlds. Earthly ritual must truly reflect heavenly ritual. Then it can become a pattern for the sanctification of all earthly activity. There is a book on earth, which even by its title claims to be the book. Bible, in both Greek and Latin, means the book. The biblical scriptures, rightly understood, are in reality not written like other books or documents, but are transparent near to heaven reproductions of the book in heaven. But the vital impact of the Bible depends on our capacity to sense through the verbal text, written as it is in earthly languages, and still more secularized and obscured by translations, the heavenly word of God. A fundamentalist clinging to the letter is in serious danger of eclipsing the heavenly book. The unique position of the Book of Books cannot be secured simply by dogmatic claims. But if the indwelling spirit word is kept alive, it can work like a leaven for all other literature. When the book appears in heaven, it is sealed. The unsealing causes the stream of images to flow. The altar appears without seals, but is not without mystery. What process of spiritual release at the heavenly altar corresponds to the unsealing of the book? We eagerly await the moment when the pictures will be replaced by the sphere of sound and tone, when the transition occurs from divine thought to deed, from divine theory to divine practice. How will the new stream of sacred activity begin to appear, which will ultimately consecrate all our human activities? During the pause in heaven, the smoke of incense ascends in silent celebration. When the waiting angels prepare to let the blast of the trumpet sound, we expect also the priestly figure at the altar to change his attitude. What will he do? His action is different from what we expected. It startles us. And the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquake. The act of consecration has its new beginning at the heavenly altar through a cosmic storm. Thunder and lightning give the signal for the sounding of the trumpets. The heavenly action cannot simply flow, blessing and sanctifying, into earthly action. Between the substance which issues from the heavenly altar and everything earthly, a high tension, a contrast, and difference in type prevails, so that at first contact only sparks and flames and fire are emitted. A terrifying secret is revealed, which will remain effective through all the 7 stages of the cycle of the trumpets. When through the fire of the heavenly altar the cosmic storm breaks over the kingdom of earth, we recognize the angel who performs the priestly service. It is he who has already intervened twice at crucial points in the apocalyptic events. With unpretentious words, he is called a strong angel, another angel, or another mighty angel. At the climax of the apocalypse, however, he is identified as that angelic being who is the only one mentioned by his own name, the Archangel Michael. We saw him first as a herald, calling for someone to open the seals. His voice is heard at the beginning of the evolution of time. Later in the 6th seal, when the continued descent of intelligence threatens to pervert the evolution of creation, he calls a halt to the powers of destruction by printing the seal of God on the foreheads of the chosen humanity of the future. He establishes ascent in descent. Now at the heavenly altar we see him again, concerned that the pause in heaven should not last too long. He gives the signal for the sounding of the trumpets. He is always the angel of progress. He sets in motion that which stands still. He wrests the seed of promise for the future from the downward plunge. Now he pours out over the earth the fire of the heavenly altar and releases the cosmic storm with the trumpets produce and sustain as they ring out one after another. The inauguration of the new cycle at the high altar sets the pitch for the first part of the trumpet blast. The first effects strike terror. They demand courage and strength in those who wish to follow the rider of the apocalypse. But the courage and strength can only live in souls which trust that there is purpose, help, and blessing in all that comes from the heavenly altar, though the divine help may be masked by a stern outward appearance. Just as the seals revealed the successive fall of consciousness, so the trumpets reveal a dramatic sequence of acts which constitute a fall of being. But the composition of the apocalypse makes it clear that the catastrophes and destruction of which we are to be spectators are nothing final as yet, but they may be passed through and overcome as necessary stages of transition. Toward the end of each of the great cycles of 7, the powers of goodness intervene to wrest domination from the power of evil. A new ascent breaks free from the downward move. Indeed, as in a parabola, the descending line should merge into the ascending branch of the evolutionary curve at the middle, i.e. the fourth stage, but the plunge projects beyond this. Here, law operates, which is similar to that whereby the coldest hours of the night come only after midnight, and the coldest months of the year only after the time of the shortest day. The crisis comes at the fifth stage. In the apocalyptic alphabet, 5 is the number of crisis and of evil. Only in the sixth cycle, in the midst of continuing catastrophes, can the fruits of trials withstood ripen and become effective. Then the powers of good wrest a new beginning from disaster and destruction. The order in the composition of the apocalypse emerged already in the sixth seal, when the strong angel who helped the unsealing to begin ordered a halt to destruction and sealed with the seal of God those who stood the test. Similarly, in the midst of the sounding of the sixth trumpet, the strong angel who with fire from the heavenly altar gave the signal for the beginning of the trumpet blast will resist the evil through the power of good. The 7 trumpets are the center and heart of the apocalypse. In them, the rhythm of its breath and pulse, the keynote of its soul can be felt. The voice of the trumpets is heard continually in the background of the whole apocalypse. Twice it was heard directly, if only for an instant. At the beginning, John heard a voice as of a trumpet. And also, again, the trumpet voice arouses him and opens the great visions. When at the beginning of chapter 8, the 7 trumpets were given to the 7 angels who stand before the face of God, we share in a cosmic moment similar to that suggested by the first words of the Bible, announcing the genesis of our world. The 7 angels with the 7 trumpets stand in the very place where, in the first still motionless symmetry, the 7 spirits of God appeared around the heavenly throne, burning like lamps of fire. They are the 7 Elohim, who appear at the beginning of Genesis, and then again in the Apocalypse. First is the 7 spirits of the lamps, and eventually, in behind, the picture of the 7 angels bearing trumpets. Each time the 7 spirits of God achieve their purpose by uttering a mighty sound. The sound of the trumpets releases in rapid succession the stages of cosmic conflagration, in which one great collapse follows another. The fire thrown from the heavenly altar, mingled with hail, falls upon the earth and causes devastation. At the second trumpet blast, a burning mountain falls from heaven. The consequences are similar. Evil is spread over the earth. At the third trumpet blast, the fire retains its direction from above downward. A burning star plunges from heaven. Renewed devastation on earth. At the fourth and middle trumpet blast, however, the fiery element withdraws, and with it the direction of the movement changes. Now evil invades the upper sphere. Sun, moon, and stars are darkened in the sky. At the next stage, the direction is completely reversed. The depths reply to the heights. The fifth trumpet blast, a star which fell from heaven, breaks through the closed door of the bottomless pit, and out of the abyss, vapors and clouds of smoke rise and cover everything. They change eventually into gigantic swarms of locusts, to which all living things fall victim. At the sixth trumpet blast, the direction from below upwards is maintained. The upward thronging forces of the pit change into spectral warriors, Horse-like beings rush madly over the earth, trampling upon everything. At the same time, their bluish steel armor makes them look like machines. Although from the sixth trumpet onwards the powers of good also come onto the scene to wrest a new upward impulse from the downward plunge. It is not until the seventh trumpet that the unfolding of evil is completed, as the twofold beast rises from the pit. What meaning and what divine purpose can be hidden behind the flames of cosmic conflagration, behind the release of demons? Heaven wishes to bestow something new. But instead of being ready to receive the new gifts, man clings firmly to the old. He must learn by experience that the old world is doomed. Only thus can the way be made clear for the gift of the heavenly altar, a new being and a new consciousness. The cycle of the seven trumpets reveals a principle of evolution, which we can recognize in the large as well as the small cycles of human history. Our present small cycle began at the end of the Middle Ages. We can attempt to understand the revelation of a series of trumpet blasts which have followed each in this epoch from the consciousness of the angel who celebrated at the heavenly altar and released the subsequent events by pouring out fire. He said before, the Archangel Michael obviously is hidden behind this. As said before, the Archangel Michael is obviously hidden behind this angel. He drives forward the wheel of history and is concerned to see that the humanity of the future should voluntarily assimilate the forces which heaven will bestow on it as new faculties and new organs. He is anxious that human beings should be able to receive and to use for their good what is intended for them. Are there not the blasts of the trumpets also warnings and admonitions of Michael? In the age of the consciousness soul, heaven draws the attention of human souls through the trumpet blast to the dangers which are inherent in the necessary progress of civilization. Since the beginning of the 15th century, European humanity has awakened to the clear perception through the senses of material objects. With this awakening, a new enthusiasm for thinking has been born. Delighted with their discoveries, human beings have looked around them with new eyes. They really began to perceive the earth itself for the first time. It has been an age in which the character of the first trumpets has asserted itself. The icy hailstones of dead thought have been mingled with the burning enthusiasm for the new science and philosophy. In the physical world, fire and hail do not mix. The spiritual picture points to the danger which threatens all enthusiasm, which is only directed toward earthly matters. It is inevitable that cold rationalism and calculations of earthly profit should be mixed with it. So all enthusiasm which does not embrace the open worlds of spirit must one day fail and end in disappointment. A second phase of recent history has produced the astonishing development of natural science. It was in the age of Galileo and Copernicus that the second trumpet sounded. Once more, within our present small scale, the flame of new thought was kindled everywhere. But the more the physical world yielded its secrets, so much more firmly was the door into heaven and the supersensible world closed. The world became stony and opaque. It was as if a rocky mountain, even though burning with heavenly fire, had fallen from heaven. This was the epoch in which Albrecht Dürer produced his classical engraving called Melancholia. The anxiety of the Archangel Michael, verging on resignation, could not be more precisely presented than in this picture. The figure of the Archangel, with weary wings, pensively supporting his heavy brow with his hand, sits beside a rock hewn in crystal form, recalling the mountain which was cast down to the earth during the second trumpet blast. If the world turned to stone for the human consciousness when natural science gained ground, so the following age of enlightenment, man himself became smaller in stature, even ever smaller in stature. The third trumpet shows a burning star falling from heaven, a star which bears the name of wormwood, because it is bitter and produces a lasting effect of bitterness. In this, there are forces at work which, like all that is bitter, acts astringently and has a shrinking effect. Sated, self-satisfied, bourgeois egoism seizes upon men, making them believe that they are great, but in fact causing their souls and spirits to become weak and shriveled. Then came the days when, for a generation, it was becoming increasingly which was becoming increasingly clever, the glory of the sun, moon, and stars was extinguished. In the past, the lights of heaven had stimulated a feeling for the unseen world, but as cleverness took more and more possession of the human soul, the last organs and capacities for supersensible perception of the universe died away. Then came the time when the bottomless pit reacted on the new soul forces of humanity, when the depths sizzled and bubbled as if drops of water had fallen on hot iron. The spectral world of abstractions poisoned the 19th century. Through materialistic thinking, man evoked forces of destruction which began to eat up his own life forces, just as when swarms of locusts descended upon the verdant life of the countryside. At this present time we are approaching the sounding of the sixth trumpet. All this must be lived through, even the change of the locust swarms of the fifth trumpet into spectral war horses, while fulfilling all the earthly duties and necessities which the present moment continually demands from us. We should not cease to reflect upon what we have done with the forces poured out from heaven, and to ask ourselves if, ultimately, the greatest amount of intelligence will not have been expended in discovering methods of reciprocal destruction. In describing the devastation produced by the first trumpet storm, the Apocalypse makes use of a recurring numerical expression. The fiery hail alights 1/3 of the earth and 1/3 of all the trees. The burning mountain turns 1/3 of the sea into blood and causes 1/3 of all creatures in the sea to die. The burning star changes 1/3 of all streams and springs into bitterness, into the ruin of mankind. The middle trumpet darkens 1/3 of the light of the sun, moon, and stars. What is meant by this third? A quantitative reading of numbers here, as everywhere in the Apocalypse, cannot help us. It would be foolish to imagine that 1/3 of physical earthly existence will be annihilated. What about the 2/3 which would then be left? All apocalyptic numbers are to be taken qualitatively. When in this context 1, 2, or 3 is counted, it would be just as true to say body, soul, and spirit. The number 3 expresses the threefold being of man. Human beings, and in a certain sense all earthly creatures, consist of the body third, the soul third, and the spirit third. To begin with, however, earthly creation, including man, has only a nature-given relationship with spirit, so long as his nature remains childlike. Man cannot count the spirit third of his being as his own possession. If he wishes to grow up and become a free, responsible individual, the spirit third, which is only the dowry of nature, does not help him do so. When destiny has once led him into the development of his ego, he will lose his dowry. Man cannot live permanently on the capital of the forces he brought with him. And when the trumpet blasts ring out, the remainder of this capital is suddenly used up with alarming rapidity. The spiritual third of the human being, as of everything earthly, falls a victim to destruction amid the cosmic storms of the trumpet age. Inherited spirituality, given by God to the first creation to help out on its way, is coming to an end. And what are the forces which complete its destruction? The fire poured out from the altar of heaven. It is the new spirituality, which, however, man can acquire only through the interactivity of faith and the awakened consciousness of spirit. Heaven pours down flames of spiritual fire through the opening doors of the supersensible world. This fire destroys everything which is not of like nature with itself, even natural spirituality. Natural spirituality, inherited, not acquired, serves only the lower ego of man. The new spirituality, to which a man opens his heart when he makes St. Paul's words come true, not I but Christ in me, can contain the fiery flames of the higher ego. Either man opens his heart to Christ, if inwardly or outwardly, he erects an altar as a pure mirror of the heavenly altar. Then the fire from heaven is for him benediction and fulfillment. Or humanity becomes more and more fettered by this material world. Then universal egoism and the war of all against all will be the order of the day, and the fire from heaven will kindle one conflagration after another, and all that man clutches and clings to will be annihilated.